Hello, BookTube. I had one pesky real-world errand to run first thing this morning, the kind of real-world errand that requires happy smiles and hygiene and pants. Ugh. I remember when I used to have to do these every day. I had to, as the business world says, interface with the real world today, first thing this morning. So I figured the way to reward myself for that would be to swing by the Brattle Bookshop once I was done with my errand. The Brattle Bookshop is a used bookstore in downtown Boston. They're an old building. They're been in business for a long time. I've been their customer for a long time. They are wonderful, absolutely wonderful. They have 3 stories, jam-packed with books, used books on every subject under the sun except romance. And they also have a sale lot next door that's full of thousands more books, thousands of books for $1, $3, or $5, not out of range in any way other than price. So you can browse to your heart's content out there. And some of you who might be new to this channel might be saying, well, didn't you just go to the Brattle Bookshop, this Brattle Bookshop? Didn't you just go the other day, just a couple of days ago? I did. It's true. Those of you who know about the Brattle firsthand, especially those of you who've been there with me, will know that it's not unreasonable that you would make 2 trips in 1 week. Not at all. I used to go, my Deb and I used to go every day when we worked around the corner at a great big Barnes & Noble in downtown Crossing. We used to work at the bookstore, then arrange our lunch together and just waddle over like Brown's cows to the Brattle, shop there, get a few things, always see something new, then come back and talk about our new books all afternoon. So I went to the Brattle, and I found a ton of books that I want to show you. A pile of books. And they cover the spectrum in terms of the things that I go to the Brattle for. I've mentioned many of those things before. A lot of times the Brattle will give you a second chance at something. For me, that's something that I've already read, I've already examined it, but it's stuck in my mind for one reason or another. I want to read it again. Or something that I read years and years or decades and decades ago, and it didn't stick in my mind. But I'm thinking I might want to read it again anyway. Or a BookTube event that might be coming up. The BookTube calendar has a whole bunch of events in it, and of those whole bunch of events, there's a small handful that are appointment events. They're things that you really don't want to miss. If I see a book that's going to fit one of those events, of course I want to get it. And also, as you're going to see, there's another thing, another common refrain at the Brattle, for me anyway, which is books in series. If I see an incomplete set, it really behooves me to get the volumes that I see, because the other volumes will turn up. Almost certainly they will. And if it's something I really want, well, I can live with having an incomplete set until the whole of it shows up. But you definitely don't want to pass up the volumes that you see, especially if they're in the sale lot. You don't want to look at them and say, well, sure, it's $2 for both volumes, but I want all 5 volumes. Because you'll never see those 2 volumes again. You'll see volumes 3 through 5 and kick yourself that you didn't get the first part when you did. So all of those things are covered here, all of them. And also rebuying old favorites, which is maybe a little bit more of a signature Brattle thing for me than it would be for most people, because I really give away books. I love sending books to people. I love it. I love doing it. Partly, it's just more fun to give than it is to receive, but also partly because it makes sense. In a bookish way, it makes sense. I am surrounded by books. I am exposed to the Brattle alone as a used bookstore. There are other used bookstores that I could go to within walking distance of the Brattle, but the Brattle alone has so much book turnover that even if it's a rare or unusual book, something you don't see that often, I am going to see it again at the Brattle. Whereas all of you, now that I have a BookTube channel, I have direct access to hundreds and hundreds of people, hundreds and hundreds of genuine book readers, book lovers, all kinds of interests, and all kinds of book buying atmospheres. If we're ruling out, the scam artists on eBay and whatnot, if we're just talking about hunting for books out in the wild, print books out in the wild, well, there are quite a few of you who live in book deserts. You live 100 miles away from the nearest bookstore maybe you live, half an hour away from a charity shop that might have a shelf of books, but it might not be any good. You need the right grouping of factors for that to not be true. Otherwise, you might live in a book desert. And a lot of you do. Maybe a lot more of you tell me that you do than that you actually do, because a lot of you know the first part, which is that I love giving things away. So I will often mention on this channel in the last 8 years, I will mention some book that is just terrific, and one of you will pipe up and say, I'd really like a copy of that. If you ever find another copy, I'd really like a copy of that, because I don't have any used bookstores near me, and I lost both my legs in the Suez War, and I'm not expected to live very long, and I don't have any money at all, not even a penny, etc., etc. All the ways that you play your violin to get me to do it. When that happens, I usually don't wait. I really ought to inculcate the response of, the next time I see a copy, I will get it for you. I don't do that. I haven't done that up until now. I really ought to do that. None of these things are emergencies, and I end up not having books when I go reaching for them. But let's take a look at what we found today. The first 4 books are for a BookTube event. They are for June on the Range, a BookTube event created by Michael K. Vaughan, coming up in June. It's fairly June-like weather today, maybe a little bit on the cool side, a little bit, 55 degrees instead of 65 degrees, but June is still technically months away, and it's designed to celebrate Western novels or Western nonfiction. And so it's ordinarily what I get at the Brattle is going into the reading roster fairly soon. I don't get books and then throw them on the shelf and forget about them. I don't do that. But when it comes to BookTube events, Garb August, Dr. November, June on the Range, sometimes there I will get those particular kinds of books and chuck them on a pile and wait until the time. Another BookTube event, another appointment BookTube event, nice old venerable BookTube event is March Mystery Madness. And I do get murder mysteries whenever I can, but I do not have the ability to chuck them on a pile and not read them. I love murder mysteries so much that I always tell myself, give yourself a nice big pile of unread stuff for March Mystery Madness, and then I read through it anyway. But not so for Westerns. For Westerns, I will leave these until June. So I found, let's see here, Logan Stewart, War Bonnet Pass. Thinking you ought to be looking where you're going there, mister. And also, you're not holding the reins. But what do we got here? Hagar had been a drifter, self-reliant and traveling alone, looking for the main chance that hadn't come along. The strip of land high in the Laramies made a difference. The strip of land the gamblers and politicians of Wyoming were ready to kill him for. His name is Hagar. Okay. All right, well. Then we have, let's see here, E. Halloran. This is The Hostile Hills. 1874, white soldiers and gold seekers in Red Cloud's country. I don't know when this came out. When did this come out? 1957. So it's possible, it's unlikely, but it's possible that this novel is going to say that the fact that it's Red Cloud's country doesn't really matter, that he doesn't have the right to shoot you for despoiling his territory. What do we got here? The U.S. government was pledged by a treaty to keep white immigrants out of Sioux lands. At the same time, it wanted its citizens to mine the Black Hills gold and get it into circulation. So the U.S. Army sourly went about the task of protecting its former enemies from white, quote, intruders. Intruders is in quotes, but it's literally true. And wondered when things could start making sense again. In other words, when can we start killing them again? Civilian scout Scott Craig had his own troubles. Well, he's not named Hagar, for a start. Army officers didn't trust him because he formerly worked for the Indian Agency. Indians didn't like anyone who connected with the Pony Soldiers. Gold seekers resented everyone who tried to keep them out of the Black Hills. Even when Craig rescued a party of whites from the lethal attentions of Chief Thunder's hostile band, he got small thanks for it. Especially from Thunder, whose etiquette called for funeral sacrifices to appease the restless spirits of his fallen fathers. Okay, I would like to be called Chief Thunder. I don't think it's likely to happen, but I'd like it if it did. Then what do we got here? Okay, this next one's by Bennett Foster. I'm not recognizing any of these names. That's another thing about June on the Range, is that the number of books, the number of westerns once upon a time flooded the market is so huge that it's almost all new territory for me. This is by Bennett Foster, and it's called 7/Range. They tore down the fences in Arizona. Well, fences or not, I think it'd probably be a better idea for you to look at the people who are shooting at you. What do we got here? This was a hardcover. This actually had a hardcover. Published by William Morrow. Good Lord. Cody Venture. Oh, it's not as good as Hagar, but it's better than just, what was his name? Craig. Had to choose. He could tear down the fences in Arizona. He could bring bloody war to the range. He could ruin the greatest man he ever knew. He could lose his woman. Or he could turn his back on the job. Sounds like a pretty easy choice to me. Hell, it was no choice for a fighting man. Here we go. Cody Venture had to stay, and the range war had to come. No man was neutral, not even the man in the middle, not when the lead was coming from both sides. Okay. These are going to be fun. These are going to be fun to do. And then finally, the last of these. This has the laminate covering is just coming right off this thing. I'll have to clean this up. The last thing I want is for this thing to be molting on me while I'm reading it. But I'm not going to read it until June on the Range. I don't think I'm going to be... it's peeling off fairly easily right now without any struggle at all. That's good. That's good. This is by Clarence Buddington Kelland. And it's called Sugarfoot, with an exclamation point. Hard Knuckles in the Old West. It looks to me like you're slapping that guy in a rather effeminate manner, not punching him, but maybe you're you brute. Yeah. What have we got here? Oh, you are molting in the worst way. Oh goodness. Wow, this was an original hardcover too, with a different photograph on a different cover. Well, that does actually make sense. As Michael K. Vaughan and a whole bunch of other people during June on the Range point out, westerns were, once upon a time, incredibly popular. They got hardcovers, and then they got reprints. Do we know anything here? This is also set in Arizona. Into Arizona, untamed frontier of outlaws, Indians, and gambling hells, came Sugarfoot Jack Reedon, an ex-soldier fresh out of the aristocracy of the South, eager for a place in this new land. And also, Jacob Stint, fugitive, shrewd, ruthless, lusting for a new world to conquer. Okay, well, this is a Bantam book, and this is Clarence Buddington Kelland. I don't think I know any of these authors. Then these next three are an author that I know very well, and I wanted to get these in the mass markets with these gorgeous, gorgeous covers, because the author is Catherine Kurtz, and just recently, on a whim, I reread her book Camber of Chaldee, in which she imagines an alternate Wales, an alternate medieval Wales, an alternate medieval England, that's very similar to the medieval Wales and England of the normal reality. Only in this, there are a number of changes, but the main one is a race called the Durini, who have Durini magic, and normal humans don't have it. And it's nothing earth-shattering. They can't destroy mountains or anything like that, or throw firebolts. And Catherine Kurtz does a very good job throughout the Camber of Chaldee books of making you, the reader, pretty aware that this isn't magic. That this is just a different species that has some psionic abilities of their own. But I like Camber of Chaldee and the Saint Camber and all that. I've read a large number of those books when they were in mass markets and inevitable in bookstores, and I liked them, but it didn't really have a whole lot of the pyrotechnics that at the time I mostly wanted. And revisiting the Camber books, I noticed a whole bunch of stuff. These are wonderfully constructed things, and if you're if you're willing to forego the pyrotechnics for well-constructed alternate history, politics, intrigue, church stuff, you're going to get a lot out of it. I got a lot more out of the Canberra books than I thought. And if the Canberra books were that alternate medieval setting where the focus is kind of the alternate medieval church, well, after that, Catherine Kurtz went back to that setting and gave us a trilogy of books that was far closer, maybe it's more than a trilogy, far closer to an examination of the politics of that era. There's plenty of politics in the Canberra books, but these are the King Nelson books. Is that what it's actually called? Yeah, the Histories of King Nelson. And I found the first three with these gorgeous Frank Frazetta covers. This is The Bishop's Heir. That's number one, just these characters riding out in the snow. And then The King's Justice. How's that for a cover? Boy, oh boy, that's just amazing. And finally, The Quest for Saint Camber. So I found 3 of the Chronicles of King Nelson. I don't know if there were more. I don't remember how long this series went. I stayed with these books, with the Canberra books, and also with I think I read the first of these, The Bishop's Heir. I'm pretty sure that I did. I stayed with these while they had the Frazetta covers. And somewhere J. Scott Phillips's head is exploding. I stayed while they had these covers. But the series kept going, and they changed their cover artist, and I left because I'm just that shallow. So those are the paperbacks that I got. I got 4 westerns, and at least 3. I don't know if I would call it a trilogy, but this is fine. I want to have some of these things in mass market paperbacks anyway, with these great old covers. Then what are we gonna look at here? Let's make some sense out of this pile. Okay, this next one is it's a terrific book, and it's a perfect example of something that I showed on a channel, probably on a library tour, and one of you really liked it. Maybe I forget the exact circumstances. Maybe you'd read it decades ago and really wanted a copy again, didn't know how to find one, that sort of thing. A lot of times people will tell me that oh my God, I haven't heard anyone mention that book in decades. I would love to read it again if you ever find a copy. When somebody does that to me, I tend to just send the copy that I have, because I'm going to see it again, and you probably aren't. And I did that. I'm pretty sure that I did that with this. So I found another copy, and I'll put a covering on it. This is Common Ground by Robert Finch. And this is a collection of nature-centered essays about the region of Massachusetts called Cape Cod. So if you're not familiar with your American geography, Massachusetts, where the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where I live, the greatest state in the Union, is a rectangle. So it starts on the eastern seacoast, and then it goes west. But past anything west of Worcester, we don't count, nor does anyone else. I don't believe anyone actually lives out there. I have my doubts about Worcester. It's a rectangle. With Boston right where the eyes of an animal would be. But there's also a fish hook of land that extends out into the Atlantic Ocean, and that land is Cape Cod. And I know it's a woolly old way to describe something. It's almost always wrong. But Cape Cod is a magical place. Not just to vacation, although 99% of the people who ever experience it on vacation, but also to live, to spend time and to get to know. I know every inch of Cape Cod. I've spent so much time there. And I love Cape Cod books. And Finch is great. This is one of the best Cape Cod books. I have hundreds of Cape Cod books, but this is one of my favorites. The one Cape Cod question that I still haven't got an answer to, because I don't have a retail bookstore. It's not this guy. There was another guy. Oh, his name is escaping me. The book is called The Outer Beach. And it's about the Cape, that fish hook that I'm talking about. It has a whole run of beaches on that inner curve, but it also has a whole run of beaches on the outer curve as well. And they are very different. They're very different, as you would imagine, since one is blasted by the ocean all the time and the other is not. But there's a book, I think it's called The Outer Beach, by a Cape Cod writer. I convinced my editor at the Christian Science Monitor to let me review it. I think it was the Monitor. It might have been the Boston Globe. I reviewed it. I reviewed that book. And because my friend Sam also loves Cape Cod, absolutely loves it, he convinced, even though he usually reviews fiction, he convinced his editor to let him review it as well. And I have yet to see whether or not we are both blurred by name on the paperback. I have yet to see a paperback of it, so I don't know. But this is exactly what I was waiting for. I was waiting to find a copy of this, so that when I sent out the copy that I originally had, I told myself, yeah, this stings a little, but you're going to see it again. So just wait and remember. Although I don't ever have any trouble remembering these things. Then we have Marvin Kittman. We saw George Washington's expense account from him, and this is his other book. I knew that if I saw the one, I would see the other. This is The Making of the President, 1789. An irreverent look on his part at George Washington. And a really good one, too. A knowledgeable but irreverent one. This has a wonderful dedication. I live now in New Jersey, heart of the Revolutionary War battlefield. The crabgrass grows where our forefathers fought and fornicated and died for their country. Major General Lafayette, a plaque tells me, slept not far, 200 yards, from where my crabgrass grows. New Jersey is now a burial ground for organized crime, whose fallen soldiers wind up near the Continental Army's dead. Jimmy Hoffa, who we locals all know is buried on the 50-yard line of Giant Stadium, may rest shoulder to shoulder with some unknown soldier of the 2nd Pennsylvania, 5th New York, or 3rd Continental Light Dragoons who died from a chill crossing the mighty Hackensack or the Passaic, which today burst into flame spontaneously as testimony to New Jersey's contribution to the Industrial Revolution. This book is for you, New Jersey, and you know right away when with that mention of the Passaic bursting into flame, this had to come out in the 70s, and it did, right? Oh no, 1989. Okay, I found a copy of George Washington's expense account. I knew that I would see this, so I have them both now. Time to reread them. Then this next one, perfect example of what I'm talking about here, of the profligacy of the Brattle. They go out buying all the time, and they buy huge amounts, huge sales, small sales, whatever it is. So if I see something at the Brattle, I know I'm going to see it again, and I might grab it, but I can afford to be picky. If I see something and I think, oh, well, I really want this. I don't particularly like this edition, but the edition that I do particularly like will turn up here. I'll get this in the meantime, or something like that. Well, I can indulge, because I go to the Brattle often enough so that I'm going to see everything. And this book, I found the hardcover. I wasn't particularly enamored of the hardcover. I really wanted a trade paperback. It's just it's going to go better on the shelf. It's more economical for weight and easier to read and whatnot. And at the same time, one of you asked for the hardcover that I found. So I had no twinge at all. I just sent out the hardcover, and it's this. It's Aviva Gottlieb Zornberg, and this is her book, The Beginning of Desire. Her reflections on the book of Genesis in the Bible. I love her writing on the Bible, absolutely love it. And this is the trade paperback, which is, it's better suited for what I want anyway. So I'm not broken up that I got rid of the hardcover. This paperback, I don't know if you can see, but it has a bit of dirt on it. So this is going to require a warm cloth, maybe an alcohol rub, to bring this to a little bit better shape. But I'm glad that I have it, absolutely. Okay, I'm running out of room here. This feng shui is not behaving. Because, of course, I don't know if you're going to be able to see, but Bean is right next to me, and she's sleeping peacefully, so I don't want to disturb her. We'll make this work. Okay, the last whole batch here is biographies. Those of you who are new to this channel, I love biographies. They're my favorite kind of writing. And I never pass up an interesting looking biography, and I have a lot of biographies mentally on a wish list. So I found a ton of biographies, and I got pretty much everything that I wanted today. Like, for instance, this first one is a perfect example of, it's a great biography. It's a great work of biography. If I had to make a list of, the best 150 biographies ever written, this would be on that list, regardless of the subject. There are plenty of times where I'm not all that interested in the subject matter, but the biography is brilliant. In this case, I am interested in the subject matter and also the author, so I gladly grabbed yet another copy of City Poet by Brad Gooch. This is a biography of the great poet Frank O'Hara, the great American poet Frank O'Hara. and it's terrific. Just a terrific biography. Really, really good. Just really good. I wonder if we'll get an author photo. We do get an author photo. I always have a copy of this book. I always get rid of it. I've had trade paperbacks. I've had hardcovers galore. I always manage to send it away to somebody who knows that there's a great, this is the great Frank O'Hara biography. Always somebody knows that biography's out there, and they're never going to find a copy, so I send it off. But I always want a copy too. I want a copy of these great 20th century biographies, especially something I'm going to revisit here every time I feel like knowing what the poets in Ghana are doing. So I grabbed this. I will definitely reread a chunk of it. Then this next one is Second Chance, a Brattle Second Chance. I got the advanced copy of this. I got the finished copy of this. Got rid of everything. Got rid of all of them. Ranked it really highly. Liked it a lot. But it has stuck in my mind. I have a whole section of my biographies for royalty. And this is royalty. I saw it on the shelf and thought, I do want that. I want to revisit it. I want to reread the whole thing. This is Andrew Roberts, who really can do no wrong. He is an incredibly readable writer. And this is his book on King George III. Huge thing. The Last King of America. I am really fond of Jeremy Black's book on King George III. I'm even fond of, what's his name? Oh my God, the name's gone right out of my head. A thinner book on George III. Oh, I want to say Christopher Hitchens, but of course it isn't Christopher Hitchens. It's almost close to that. It's gone right out of my head. I've read a lot of biographies and also a lot of biographical treatments. King George and the Mad Business, for instance, is a classic. I've read a lot on this monarch. Those of you don't need any introduction to King George III, especially after Hamilton. But he was the last king of America. He was the tyrant who ordered Boston to be sieged and Boston to be blockaded and troops to be quartered not only on Boston Common but also in houses in Boston. We're going to 5 soldiers are going to live in your house. Show them any disrespect at all, and you'll be arrested. If you're arrested, you could be worse than that. And it's not a question of just not showing them disrespect. They're going to eat your food. They're going to use your blankets and your fuel. And that's all there is to it. And if you don't like it, tough. The work of a tyrant, in other words. So, in this book, Andrew Roberts goes to bat for King George III enormously, even more than he did for Napoleon Bonaparte. And with Napoleon Bonaparte, I was willing to smile because there's no rehabilitating Bonaparte. He was a monster. And here, the smile was even broader because on an intellectual level, I acknowledge that there may be a way to rehabilitate King George III. He was a long-ruling and fairly decent guy. The reason my smile was a little broader is because there's absolutely no way you can rehabilitate him for a Bostonian. Absolutely no way you can do that. The rest of the colonies, well, they had their bad experiences with King George III. Boston bore the brunt of his tyranny directly. So there was no way that Andrew Roberts was ever going to convince me, but I really enjoyed this book. So I figured, why pussyfoot? Why not just, get a copy? As long as there's a copy there, why not just grab it? And as long as we're talking about the blockade of Boston, as long as we're talking about Boston things, we might as well finish up with intensely Boston books. Like, for instance, these 2 volumes, although it's entirely possible, if you were situated correctly, to go Boston book hunting with Frank O'Hara. Entirely possible for that to happen. But I found 2 volumes here of a quintessential Boston figure. A hero from Boston. I found 2 volumes out of a 4-volume set, and I wasn't about to leave them. Because, first of all, there's no chance that the person who had these 2 volumes didn't have the other 2. And there's also no chance that anyone else is going to want them. So I found volume 1 and volume 2 of the memoir and letters of Charles Sumner. And these are edited by Edward Pierce. When Sumner was dying, he left instructions to 3 literary men of Boston that they could have the whole run of his papers and his library. Do with them what you want. You can destroy everything. You can publish it in excerpts. You can use it for historical work. You can do whatever you can donate it. You can do whatever you want with them. And Edward Pierce was one of those people. Edward Pierce it deserves a biography of his own. I'd love to get his own book. That would be a dream come true. I'd also love to get the book of his brother. His brother was a representative from Massachusetts. Henry Pierce was a politician of long standing, and I think if I remember correctly, he had a book. But Edward Pierce, it's difficult to describe in the 21st century, an unbelievably debased and depraved century. It's difficult to describe what the Pierces were like. They weren't alone at all. It's difficult to describe upstanding public men. It feels so weird. It feels so weird to even use that phrase. But the Pierces were. They were upstanding public men. And Edward Pierce was appointed by a number of official boards, presidents, and governors to do all sorts of public services. And he did them really well. So did his brother. And he wrote this gigantic work on Charles Sumner, who was a hero of his own. We've talked about Charles Sumner on this channel before. I gave you a long story time about Charles Sumner when I was repairing Donald David's book, Charles Sumner and the Rights of Man. I'm pretty sure that was what it was. I hesitate to leave a link to that video, even if I can find it. I hesitate to leave a link to it because I'm worried that it will traumatize all the book collectors out there who still leave comments on my book repair videos saying, this is destroying the value, when I make it clear that I don't care about the value. I make it that clear, and yet I still think I'm traumatizing these little daffodils. So, but if I can, I will try to remember to leave a video, because a lot of you might not have seen it. A lot of you are new to the channel, so you might not have seen that video, and it tells you the story of Charles Sumner, the glory of a thing like this. I got volume 1 and volume 2. Volume 3 and 4 are out there somewhere. The glory of an older multi-volume biography like this is that it will do what even a great new Charles Sumner and the Rights of Man is a great biography, but it will not do this. It will not give you hundreds of pages of Sumner's own letters. It will not delve for 36 pages into tiny little incidents in his life as a teenager or a man in his 20s. Those later biographies will be written from 30,000 feet. These old Life and Times volumes that I have for so many old Boston luminaries, these are not written that way. They're not written that way. They're written from the ground up, not from 30,000 feet. And if you really love a historical figure, if you really want to know about them, well, you're going to want books like this. You're going to want all of those later biographies, something like this, but you're going to want something that goes into granular detail. I am, anyway. So I got these two, and I will just have to hope that volumes 3 and volume 4 turn up at the Brattle. I don't mind if they don't. Volume 1 and volume 2. What does volume 2? Volume 2 goes to 1845. Okay, so I would like to get the story to go a little bit closer to the American Civil War than that. But that is still a lot. That's the young Charles Sumner. Tall and gorgeous and memorable. Absolutely memorable. In terms of just a Boston personage. You could tell people knew when he was a teenager that he was destined for greatness. And, well, if he was memorable, then this last book, the last one that we'll do here, well, this is another level completely. Although, much like Charles Sumner, and much like the Pierce brothers, gone completely. Nobody remembers these 19th century Boston figures except me. I think. Certainly, historians don't seem to remember them because the books don't come out. There are no books on them anymore. That probably the number one thing after my autobiography, Odd Dog, probably the number one book that most of you want me to write is a 1,000-page literary and social history of 19th century Boston, which I would call the hub of the universe. It was christened that. I found another example of a book where I had a copy, and it was in fairly rough shape, and one of you really wanted it, so I sent it out. And it's an older book. This is from, what? How old are you? Oh my God, do we even want to know? Well, no, this is more than a century old, and it's an older book, and the copy that I had was in rough shape. But the person I sent it to said, "That's okay, I'll take it." So I sent it out, and again, there was only a tiny pang because I knew that I would see it again, and I did. I found it. This is Carolyn Tickner's book, Dr. Holmes's Boston. It has the State House on. That's the Boston State House on the cover there. If you ever come to Boston, I'll show you the State House. If we're not pressed for time, I'll gladly give you a tour of the State House. On the inside, I know every cubbyhole of the State House. And here is the house on Beacon Street, where there was Dr. Holmes. This is Oliver Wendell Holmes that we're talking about. Not Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., not the Supreme Court Justice, but his father, whose position in American letters in the 19th century I would not even be able to describe. There is no equivalent today. He was everything. He was a gigantic, towering figure. And here you actually have the figure. There he is in his famous hat, walking past the house on Beacon Street. And this is a whole bunch of... so many great pictures in here. Oh my, look at that. And there are also photographs in here. Let me get you one of those as well. Just so we can see here. Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, wow. Oh, look at that. Oh, none of that looks the same now, that's for sure. It all looks very different now. Is this an aerial view of Boston? Or is this the wake of the Great Fire? Yeah, the fire of 1872. Oh, man. Boston would have lost so much. Look at that devastation. Boston would have lost so much, but the fire, the vagaries of wind and current and whatnot, stopped it from destroying some truly historic places. But this... Here, let me get you the opening of the book to show you what this is. There we go. This is a collection of bits and pieces of Holmesiana, brought together and edited by Carolyn Tickner, who was the granddaughter of the Tickner of Tickner and Fields, the great publisher, the great American publisher, and an amazing figure in her own right. She wrote a bunch of... I wish that her books would show up at the Brattle. That would be incredible. Probably they're on the third floor. The third floor of the Brattle is rare books, antique books, that sort of thing. I never go up there. I'm not going to pay $50 for a book. I'm not going to do it. She might be up there. There might be a local section up there where she is. I would love to find some of her books because they are really good reading. And she was a fascinating figure in Boston's literary scene at the end of the 19th century. She flourished at the end of the 19th century. She lived until the late 1930s. And she died approximately 15 feet from where I'm sitting right now. I disavow all responsibility, but nevertheless, this is a tight-knit Boston world with Carolyn Tickner, Dr. Holmes, also the Pierce brothers, and Charles Sumner. We end on a very Bostonian note. But should we try a Steve Pyramid? Dr. Holmes is Boston. How amazing to find another copy of this when it's what the Brattle will provide. That is what I love the shop for. It enables me not only to indulge in a bookish sweet tooth to my heart's content, but also to be generous to everybody else, because it's not a rarity. I'm going to see it again. I'm going to see what I'm sending you. Then 2 volumes of Pierce's Life and Letters of Charles Sumner. Just have to wait for the other 2 volumes. City Poet by Brad Gooch. I love this book. Just a classic modern biography. The Last King of America by Andrew Roberts. It's a little bit too polemical to be a classic work of biography on its own, but boy, oh boy, is it readable. What else have we got here? Common Ground by Charles Finch. Cape Cod, so another great rebuy. The Beginnings of Desire, another great rebuy, only this time in trade paperback. The Making of the President, 1789. The title is a takeoff of the Making of the President books that came out every presidential election once upon a time. Those books, if you see them at yard sales, they are terrific. They are indispensable volumes about American political history. This is sort of a takeoff of that. And then mass markets. We have the Histories of King Nelson. 3 of these great old Del Rey mass market paperbacks that I read and loved so much once upon a time, and 4 westerns that I'm just going to chuck away. I'm just going to, unlike the rest of these, I'm just going to chuck these things on a pile of unread westerns for June. Which will be here before you know it. But anyway, that's another Brattle book haul this week, full of fun stuff, full of Boston stuff. I don't think I'll be back to the Brattle this week. I'm pretty sure that I won't be. I'm pretty sure that I will leave it fallow for a week or so. But if I do, you'll be the first to know. So I'll wrap this up for now. I figured if Sarah at the Bookish Knitter was going to do a book haul, I was going to do a book haul. But I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.